Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming to another special edition of the Atticus Advantage webinar series. Today's topic is technology and tips to run a secure practice remotely. This topic is of special interest, obviously, because of the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic, and we are very grateful for today's presenter. Before we begin, just a few logistics to go over with you. If you'd like to ask a question, there are a couple of methods to do so. You can use the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard to send that question in. If you'd like to remain anonymous, please indicate so in your message. You can also click the hand icon if you have a comment or a question, and we'll call on you during the Q&A section at the end, and we'll unmute you so that you can be heard. If you're unfamiliar with Atticus, we were founded in 1989 to provide in-depth ongoing support and accountability programs for law firms that help you increase your gross revenue, your personal take-home pay. We want you to reduce your stress and the number of hours you spend in your office. We want you to have a greater sense of career satisfaction, and we want you to have more time for your family and personal interests. We work with all kinds of attorneys, solo and small firms. We do also work with some large firms, but usually just the managing partners. We work hand in hand with legal associations across the country, and we believe in a lifetime relationship in which we are with you from beginning to end, from when you found your practice to when you are ready to move forward. We also offer several things just like this webinar. We offer free monthly webinars. We have one-day workshops and half-day workshops. We have group coaching programs that meet quarterly. We also, of course, offer one-on-one coaching, which is the foundation of our company. We have also several books available in our online store. Today's presenter is Victor Medina, and Victor is one of our longtime clients who has, as they say, drank the Kool-Aid, and he is now teaching some of our group programs. Victor is the founder of Medina Law Group. He's also a certified elder law attorney, and he has been coaching now for over 8 years. Victor, I am so happy you are here, and everybody is so lucky to have you on this broadcast because you are an expert when it comes to legal tech. And Victor also operates an annual legal tech conference, which you'll hear a little bit about at the end. So thank you, Victor, and I'm going to just leave it to you. My name is Mike Wells. I'm the organizer. So if you have any questions, just chat them in, and I'll be the person helping you out.
Great, thanks, Mike, and thanks for that strong introduction. So, by the way, Mike, if we see anybody that comes up or that has a question that is relevant to what I'm talking about, feel free to go ahead and interrupt me, especially if you think that I haven't made something clear on what I'm sharing, because I certainly tend to go quickly off of it. I want to go over for everybody. First of all, welcome. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for attending. I know that if you are attending, it's largely because you want to learn more, you're concerned about what's going on generally in the environment that we're in right now. And I think that one of the best things that you're doing is taking proactive steps to learn more and be better prepared. The goal for all of what Atticus is providing in the number of the webinars that they are offering is really a strength of a foundation so that the firms that take action and are addressing everything, all of the challenges that they're facing are the ones that survive at the end, and there are going to be challenges. So, I want to thank you for attending. I have 4 goals that I want to go over in terms of what we are going to be presenting today. I want to give you an overview of the tools that are available to help you and your team work remotely. If you're not already facing a remote work scenario forced upon you or forced upon your team because of school closings, I would say it's probably not too much to suggest that you will be facing it. And even if it never comes to fruition, the idea that you are prepared for this in this way will probably pay dividends, give you an opportunity to think about your practice differently. Anything that you're going to make on decisions on here, I'm not endorsing anything in particular. I will share what's worked for me. I have a great bit of knowledge as a survey on lots of different things that are available for you, but the idea here is that if you make a decision on something specific, you should do your own due diligence on it, because I don't represent any particular company. I'm not endorsed by any particular company. All I've tried to do is really stay smart on a lot of the tech tools that are available, in addition to running my own tech conference, which I'll mention at the end. That Atticus said that I could, by the way, so that's good. But in addition to that, I've been a panelist for the ABA Tech Show probably I don't know, 6 to 7 years running for a period of time. And then myself and another practice advisor named Mark Metzger, who many of you know, formed a bit of a click and clack team over at the ABA Tech Show. And we came out with the highest ratings of any of the other speakers by a far amount. So we know a little bit, but you should want to do your own due diligence. Where I quoted prices here, it was where it was fast and convenient. If I could find it online, that's fine. I did not go into the detail of all of the subscription-based stuff that's available. And so if there is something that's $9 a month, $49 a month, or whatever it is, I'm going to actually have to leave that to you to go and figure out. I do know that there are things that cost. And so you may have questions like, is it worth the paid version of it? I don't quite know. I'll tell you what the differences are on a survey of different tools, if that be the case. But and the other thing about the prices and your own due diligence is my experience with people in tech is if you find a tool that works for you, you become an evangelist around that particular tool. If it's working for you, that is great. I'm a Mac guy, but many years ago, I gave up trying to convince people that they should use Mac as well. So use whatever works. And so if you feel particularly strong about something, that's great. If you want to sort of share it in the questions, like, well, what about this? I probably missed some stuff. I probably missed some great stuff that's out there. And so if you found something that you swear is working for you, I will believe that it's working for you and happy to share it with the rest of the group. But what I shared came from my knowledge on all of these tools and the things that were actually working for me, okay? And then lastly, if you attended the first session on Tuesday that Mark Powers and Sean Canales offered on disaster preparedness generally, one of the things that they focused as strategies was monitoring your cash flow, assessing and analyzing where you were on that, making a list of non-essential expenses, preserving cash flow, having the opportunity to grab lines of credit, things like that. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here is going to cost money. Few of it is free. And so if you are going to come to a decision about working remotely, I would say it really needs to be driven by your own cash flow considerations. Some of you are in a better position to finance work remote quick and at no expense to your wallet. Some of you, this would be a significant cut into what your cash flow is. And so you're going to have to make those decisions. And if I am at all and ever been a student of Mark Powers, I would say that you're going to want to spend money on the people that are doing your marketing and the things that help you with your marketing, because you are going to encounter an environment where deferred demand for legal services is the norm. And so your marketing is going to drive you to have a larger portion of a smaller pie as it exists, and position you to be able to reap the rewards when the demand breaks free. So really kind of, I would say, favor more of the marketing stuff that's in there. Quick cartoon, all right, I'm working remotely. I think that if you've never been in a scenario about working remotely, if you haven't done that before, I think that there is probably a lot of misconception about what it looks like. And so what I want to try to do is give you a set of tools, but also by the end of it, so between tech, hardware, software, things like that, but also by the end of it, give you a set of best practices. One of the sessions that we did at my tech conference, the last time that we held it, I think in 2018, focused on a company that had moved to a completely distributed model. And so what they did is they shrank their office space, physical office space, to only group meeting space, and everyone else worked on a distributed model. So they were all working remotely from home. And it was a great education that I received, and I'm sharing a lot of that with you, about what it took to take a company. This is a software company, it wasn't a law firm, but taking the ideas that would make it possible for them to ship and implement on stuff, give customer service, work sales and marketing, and be able to also create culture and drive the company as an entire unit in a direction. Great number of pieces of advice that came from that. And we're going to want to share that with you at the end as well. By the way, I think we are scheduled for about an hour as what it is advertised. If the system allows me to keep going and the questions keep going, I'm fine going to about 12:30 or half an hour past the time. But I have a lot of information to share in a very short amount of time. So we're just going to dive right into it. Again, this is largely a survey. Let's talk first about hardware. So I think that there are a lot of questions about what I can and shouldn't use for this. And so I kind of want to go through some best practices for it. The first thing that I want to deal with is the main computer of what you're going to be using or your team might be using. And so you've got a couple of different options if you want to use sort of a full computer or a laptop versus a Chromebook. And so you could go in and grab a full, working laptop with high specs on it. Apple just released MacBook Airs for $1,000, which is actually a price cut for them. I think that their 13 inches were close to $1,100 before. That was just announced yesterday. And there are Windows machines that are similarly priced for a full piece of hardware. Your alternative is to go with a Chromebook, but that only really works if the majority of your services are cloud-based or software as a service, because the Chromebook is going to give you access to the internet, but it's going to give you very little onboard storage. And so you're not going to be installing software locally to run on the computer. You're going to be using that as software as a service. And as we get to some of the different decisions that you're going to be making about that, understand that your bandwidth, your internet, what you can use is going to be taxed by the fact that you're running everything as software as a service, using bandwidth for that. And so when we start talking about communication tools and things that you might be able to use like Zoom or Slack or Skype or whatever you're going to be doing that also takes that, or VoIP, using voice over internet protocol. If you're going to be doing anything like that, that taxes your bandwidth, you better have really great bandwidth if you're also going to add a Chromebook. But I was talking with a program member of mine because, as Mike mentioned, I drink the champagne that Atticus makes. And in our DYM group that I was in, I was coaching one of their clients through, or one of my fellow coaching members saying, okay, look, if you have a Chromebook, that kind of works if you do these types of things, and they're about $250 as a comparison, okay? The next thing to kind of think about after that is using a mobile device. And again, you can get into, tools like the iPad Pro or even the iPad Air for $399, which is extremely powerful, that has like pencil input, or using a Surface or a Surface Pro, and look at that. Now, the benefits, I think, to using a mobile device tend to be longer battery life. If you have somebody that can't be plugged in all the time, these devices tend to have all-day battery associated with them, and that their suite of software solutions tends to have you better focused on what you're using at that time. So what I mean by that is that if you open up a laptop window, you could have 16 windows open. Your productivity goes way down trying to think that you can multitask. With the iPad Pro, you might have one or two pieces of software open at the exact same time, but you'll be able to kind of narrow in and focus just on the work that you're doing. So I've always looked at the mobile devices as a better focus device than a full laptop. But again, you're going to want to be thinking about that on your own. And the idea behind that is that the iPad Pro, the Surface Pro actually comes with a keyboard, but you're going to want to outfit them like you would a desktop computer. So think about a monitor device, think about a keyboard, and now Apple iPad Pro just came out with a floating keyboard that works with this newest generation and the older generation that gives you full trackpad control and some other things as well. A couple of additional alternatives on laptop that you may not have thought about, which is an all-in-one Windows machine like the Asus all-in-one. That's a lower price product, but it includes inside of there everything that kind of looks like a laptop, but it's actually a desktop. And so it kind of works that way as a tablet function off of it, sort of an all-in-one. The other component of it is another option is a mobile mini PC. And so this is a very small device, very minimal power. I've just used one here called the Mini PC Z83V for $120. That an acronym out there is bring your own keyboard, monitor, and mouse. And so all this is a head. It's probably no bigger than the size of your phone. And what it does is it includes on there Windows 10, it includes an HDMI out. And so it's basically a computer in a very small box. And so if you're looking for cheap and the people that you're going to be giving this to are going to have their own monitor and you're just going to be giving them the box, this is a way for you to control the hardware component of that and be able to give them a full working device that is a PC. I know nothing similar in the world of Apple. I mean, Apple has issued a Mac Mini, but that's more like $799, and you might as well get the $999 full laptop with a keyboard and mouse and everything else attached. Speaking about keyboards, monitors, and mice, a couple of recommendations here. In terms of monitors, I'm going to tell you that you're going to want to look for at least 21 inches for the size of the screen. So what we're looking for is a setup at home that allows people to work as though they're in the office. And so you might already have been doing this at home, in your office, and you just can send people home with a monitor. Or you can say, well, what's working there? I would just say, don't get anything smaller than 21 inches because you'll be upset with it, and they're going to get strained off of it. You may want to think about an elevated stand so that they're working at kind of an ergonomic level for the eye level, HDMI input, and to the extent that you're going to be rolling out communication tools like Zoom or GoToMeeting or Skype, and trying to meet with clients and referral sources on a virtual basis, an embedded webcam goes a long way for that. One of the seminars that I gave yesterday to one of my practice growth group that I coach was a dedicated camera. And for that, I recommended the Logitech Brio. It's the one that I'm using. And so to the extent that you think it's clear and it looks good, that's basically what I'm using if you wanted something that was off-boarded for that. For keyboard, you basically going to make a decision between wired and wireless. The idea between the wired and the wireless ones are that the wireless ones are going to need some form of battery life and charging off of it, whereas the wired ones carry their own battery. One of the ones that I like, I'll show you right here. This is a Logitech, and it comes with a solar panel inside of it. And so the idea here is that it actually never needs a battery, and it's always charged. This is a K750. And I tend to like Logitech as outboard peripherals because they have this unifying software. So you use a single USB dongle, so you don't have to worry about additional slots being used. If you only have a few slots, it works. And so what you do with the USB-A dongle, that's the long flat one, okay, is that multiple devices can use that same Bluetooth communication. And so you can have your mouse and your keyboard working off the same dongle to the extent that you go with Logitech. Looking for something that's ergonomic, and so something that has multiple buttons off of it that's going to always improve productivity if they can slide things, if they can copy, if they can right click, if they can do all the things that they need to do with a mouse that has that. But the two best manufacturers that I've encountered are Logitech again, and interesting enough, Microsoft. So here I am, a Mac guy, an Apple guy, and I actually love Microsoft peripherals. They have a keyboard called the Ergo, which is actually a split keyboard with deep travel that I think is fantastic. So worth exploring there as well. Okay, let's move on to phone and communication over the phone. You have a couple options here. You can use your cell phone or your team member's cell phone. And I'm going to go over some software solutions for communication for that. And the ways that you can, I use the word spoofing, and I don't want you to adopt that as a black hat thing. But I know a lot of people have questions about how is it that I get something other than my cell phone number to show up for that. I'm going to give you some tools to do that, but that you're using your own cell phone is one option. You can also use a soft phone, which is a way of using your computer as your phone. And so if you have a voice over internet protocol or a VoIP system like Vonage or RingCentral, even using Google Voice, you can use your computer to dial out using its bandwidth, and then it will kind of develop its own phone number that it uses. However, if you do that, I would definitely recommend that you have a headset, and it would be better if you had an Ethernet connection and you weren't doing it wirelessly. So if you know anything about internet communications back and forth, they divide up the signal of anything you want to send into packets that are these binary things, ones and zeros together in these packets that represent a waveform, a sound, a piece of data. And when they get transmitted over, they get transmitted as a packet, not as a stream of sound. And so a lot of times what will happen is if you get glitchiness in the communications, it's not that you're getting broken up, but what's happening is the packets are arriving in different orders, and they're getting played out just when they come in. So all I'm saying is that you want great bandwidth, because if you're going to be communicating using internet at all, you're going to be driven by the size of the number of packets that can travel through the pipe or the tube of communication going back and forth, uploading and downloading speeds. The other options you can do is a specific VoIP handset. And so these are for people that are already on VoIP systems. So we use Vonage Business here in my office. And what that means is that every station has an Ethernet cord plugging into a soft phone, a VoIP handset phone. And so it communicates using our internal systems here. And when I plug in the Ethernet, you can actually have it a powered Ethernet too, for some of them, it sends the signal out. What it means is that that Ethernet can get plugged in anywhere. I can take the handset home, plug in Ethernet cable into the back of that handset, and have my phone working, okay? Because the address of the phone and everything else that's in there is already pre-programmed into that device. It will recognize me on the system, and I can have a working phone with a handset and buttons and the whole thing, and even being able to transfer calls using just that handset. One of the tricks, by the way, to getting access to Ethernet, because everyone has moved to wireless. Some of you have Eros or you have Ubis, or you've got something that will use a mesh network. On the back of the bigger devices that are in there, specifically like Eros or your router, you'll actually still have a plug for Ethernet. And so all you need is an Ethernet cable that comes out of the back of that into the phone. If you want an Ethernet connection off of that, you just be restricted by where those devices are. So the mesh network that we use here in the office and the one that we use back at home is Eero, E-E-R-O, and that is a distributed mesh network where you plug these different devices all over the place, and it just gives you one internet. So you don't have to have an extender, and you don't have multiple networks that you're signing on to. It's a single network, and no matter where you go, the mesh sort of connects you. Each one of the base ones of those has 2 Ethernet cables that are coming out of it. So what we did here in the office is we took one of those plugs into a switch, very inexpensive 5 switch, maybe it was $30 or $40, and then we got 5 cables that were coming out that can go off to the phone. So you can do the same thing at home, as you can get either the back of the Eero or use the back of the router if you need to move the location of where it is that you are working. All right. Moving on, I do recommend, if you deal with a lot of paper or if you produce paper, that you get a scanner. And here I do have one clear recommendation and one only. I believe that the best in class for scanners is a Fujitsu ScanSnap. Now, it happens to be that their most recent model, the IX1500, goes for about $315. But if you found any of their older models, you'll love them. So there's the IX500. Both the IX1500 and the IX500 are wireless. So once they're set up, you don't have to keep them plugged in to your device. You can push the button, it will scan it, it will send it electronically and wirelessly to wherever you want it to arrive, including devices, mobile devices. And so those 2 models, the IX models, are the wireless models. What I love about the ScanSnap is that it scans both sides on one pass. It does color, it will digitize it, it'll do OCR, it will do things of different sizes. So if you have anything that you need to, a business card, a receipt, or anything that goes in there, you just drop the spec in there, hit the button, and it comes all the way through. They're workhorses. We have one on almost every desk here in the office, and we have ones that come back 10 years. Just clean the rollers and you're ready to go. In a pinch, if you don't want to spend any money, you can use a cell phone app for this. So you can use you can use Scan Plus. You can use any one of those software and just use your phone to snap a picture. It will give you an opportunity to draw a box around what is a piece of paper. You can upload it as a PDF and manipulate it that way. But you're going to want to think about that because paper is still going to be used in some fashion. And so you want to think about this. By the way, this presentation doesn't talk about going paperless. That's a completely separate discussion about how you do PDF signatures, digitize digital signatures. And I'm happy to answer some questions around there, but we're not really delving into the structure around working paperlessly. Just understand that one of the core principles of that is that you essentially never turn something that is electronic into something that is analog. Once you get it digitized, it stays digitized and you manipulate it on a digital manner. And the only reason you'd ever print it out is because you have to mail it to somebody. But you never want to be printing out emails and hand marking them up. And there's ways around that in a paperless setting. So that's our hardware section. Let's switch over to communication. So hopefully most of you are comfortable enough with the hardware in order to get up and running. And a lot of questions that I've been receiving have been in the area of communication. So one of the things that I did is I broke this down to the difference between external communications, those going outside to referral sources, prospects, and clients, and then those that are internal communications, project management, things that you need to do with an internal team if they're in a distributed work mode. So first thing that we're going to talk about is that if you want your phones to continue to follow you when you are out and you're not in the office, you really have essentially VoIP or voice over internet protocol, internet phones, okay, as your solution. And so the three biggest players in here are RingCentral, Vonage Business, and actually Google Voice. The two differences between that is that RingCentral and Vonage Business have a few plans that are low cost, but they start to cost more money, especially the larger organization that you create. Google Voice you can get absolutely for free. They're each going to give you the opportunity to spoof your number, meaning that dialing out using their app or using your voice over internet phone, if you have a handset, will show up as a different number than the actual cell phone or anything else that you're using. So you can take RingCentral or Vonage Business, even Google Voice, use your cell phone, dial out using that app, and tell the world what number you want to show up at. And so in our office, that means that we've got team members that can use their cell phone, launch the Vonage Business app, dial out, and it says our main line is the number that's going out. And so I think that's probably one of the better options, but it requires you to have been set up with that ahead of time. And so if you're not there, you'd either have to sign up for RingCentral as a pure app off of that or something else.
Hey,
is there a question, Mike?
We've had a couple of suggestions. One is Verizon One Talk, if you have any knowledge about that, and also Google Hangouts as a communication tool like Zoom.
Yeah, so we're going to get to Hangouts as a way of having internal communications or things to like share meetings and doing virtual meetings. I'm just trying to cover like phone calls for right now, as opposed to anything that's video, because the Google Hangout does that. I have no knowledge of the Verizon One Talk, but it's the same setup, right? It's basically the ability to use a virtualization of phone messaging and then being able to either spoof a number so that what sends out is something different, because one of the bigger questions is around that, or something else.
Sure.
Was there another question, Mike?
Well, just a couple I wanted to bring up as well. Also, there is GoDaddy has a service as well that you can use, a phone service. There's also Sideline that you can do as well too. Sideline, I think, starts at $9.99 a month, and the GoDaddy phone product begins at about $12 a month. Someone also
I think if you do a search of these,
Nextiva.
Yeah, and so I think if you do a search of these, you'll find that there are a lot of providers in this area, because it really doesn't take too much to register from a regulatory standpoint, the fact that you are grabbing a phone number and then using that number to communicate. And so I've seen, 888, I've seen a number of ones in there that you could pick from. I would only recommend that you go with the largest stable company that you can find, because one of my predictions is that as the majority of the world starts to work, or US anyway, works remotely for 4 to 6 weeks or longer, the stress that's going to be placed on some of the bandwidth that these companies have set up, because realize the way that they process this stuff is they buy computer heads at a server farm someplace in, Oregon or in Texas. And the amount of bandwidth that they can process, because they're all IP driven, so you're pointing all of these directions at a particular box, a physical box that's processing this stuff. So the amount of bandwidth that they can manage is dictated by the amount of boxes that they have allocated towards this. And so what you want is a company that's large enough to have a farm of boxes that are using in there, have redundancy off of that, have an kind of like an uptime off of it that isn't going to be threatened. And so whether they're using Rackspace or AWS or whatever they're doing to manage the flow of information back and forth, you're really kind of looking at that stuff. Speaking of virtual meeting solutions, so I think the ones that everyone's seen already is Zoom. You're on GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar right now. There's WebEx, there's Skype, there's Google Hangouts. And again, the success of these is really going to be driven by the bandwidth that they can manage. There are trade-offs on all of these. in terms of their ability to establish awesome communications back and forth. One of the benefits of Zoom is that you're going to be able to have multiple screens, everybody seeing themselves, and then being able to kind of interact almost as though you're in a virtual boardroom for what you have. GoToMeeting I've always used as a better form to be able to demonstrate something or have not so much a one-way communication, but if you're having a presentation, if you're going to host a webinar, if you're going to do something that didn't really require a lot of back and forth and visual communication with people, you might look at something like GoToMeeting for that. Google Hangouts is going to be closer to Zoom in the way that you can have multiple screens on there. And I think the other one that I would recommend for this is, anyway, it's an option if people have Apple devices, is that FaceTime actually has group chats off of it. So you can make FaceTime calls that are group FaceTime calls as well for that. So that's some recommendations for that. There have been questions about handling mail. And so one of the things we recommend is, you can have somebody that can access this stuff, use one of those great ScanSnap scanners, just run everything through there, digitize it, and then distribute it, okay? At some point in time, you may want to think about forwarding it to a place that you can essentially go and collect it from if it's not going to be in your office. And one of the reasons why we're going to think about forwarding, of course, is if for some reason it turns out that your building ends up shutting down. You may not have control over that. I happen to own my building, so I can determine whether or not we're open. But a lot of you are in corporate parks, you are office sharing with somebody else, and you may not be in a position to dictate whether or not you can go in and get something. You actually might physically be on a lockdown off of that. And so you're going to want to think about possibly forwarding that. And if you're set up well to work remotely at home, you'll be able to kind of, be able to distribute the mail and continue to do that. A lot of you have had questions about receptionists and using virtual receptionists. So one of the things you can think about is using a call forwarding off of that. Now you can do that whether or not you're on voice over internet protocol, VoIP, or if you have a hardline off of it. One of the things you can do is dial it in. A lot of this stuff is remote access for what you have. So you can go into Verizon, for instance, or AT&T, dial a number, put in your number, put in the forwarding number, and then it gets forwarded out. You could marry this with like a Google Voice option. And so, for instance, if you signed up for Google Voice and you got a phone number from Google and you can get a local number from them that's free, you could forward all of your main communications to the Google Voice number. That Google Voice number can then distribute and forward it out to different people on your team, depending on whoever's watching the phones at any particular time. So that's a way of marrying sort of your hardline existing stuff with a digital solution so that you can maintain continuity. Some of you may not have access to a receptionist, or you were your receptionist and now you can't do all of those tasks. And so you can use a virtual receptionist. And two of the bigger providers in here is Ruby Receptionist, and the other one is Back Office Betties, which I've put in as Bob. And so those are both going to give you opportunities to forward your line to their farm of individuals so that a live voice picks it up, and you can give them all kinds of instructions about how to route things. If it's a new client, do this. If it's an existing client, do that. If they ask for this person, take a message. I'll be available from these times. And so that works as a really great high-touch hand-holding service so that you can then appear to the outside world as though you are up and running with a lot of client contact. And I will tell you, each of Ruby and Back Office Betties, and I have my most experience with Ruby, go through a lot of training to bringing a especially warm voice to what's going on, and do a lot of training to understand that their role is to support you and make it so that clients feel well received and well taken care of when they in fact communicate with you. Okay, going into internal communications. And so with internal communications, if we're just talking about how to communicate back and forth, you might think about Slack, which is a service that's free. And what you do there is most of it's free. If you want different add-ins, it costs money, but you can start free. And the idea there is you can create multiple channels off of that so that you can invite certain people to things. Think about it like department communications. It's a better form than email. It's a more robust form than text message, but you would be able to kind of share communications sort of like group. You can create a channel marketing, and you and the marketing person are on that. You can post files. you can have communications, you can set alerts, you can do all kinds of things off of that, even have direct communication. So we've been using Slack in our office for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years already. And I actually have multiple Slack companies that are in place. So my main company, my financial services company, those are 2 separate companies that are on there. The stuff for my tech conference is one. My singing group is another. So you can have multiple communications. In fact, we've encouraged people to have communications with each other. So you might have your a coaching group. If you're part of an Atticus coaching group already, you might have your coaching group create a Slack channel so you can share information back and forth. So I tend to like Slack. WhatsApp, which is a Facebook owned property, is a way that if you have international communications, you're probably already familiar with that. That's what is used most internationally. You can also use FaceTime if everyone's on an Apple device, as they mostly are here in our office. And you can use that as a way to do that. Slack will also, by the way, give you an opportunity to do calls and video chats. And that's still part of the free level of what they have. You just kind of pick the person, and then both of you need to have that app open. What I like about Slack, in addition to the stuff that I've already talked about, is that it has mobile or device apps. So not only is it on the laptop, but it is everywhere where someone is. And so if you had a staff member or a team member that didn't have a laptop or wasn't going to be working on certain things, you can still communicate with them just using their phone or using an iPad or Android device or anything you want off of it. There's multiple, platforms that the app goes onto, but it's a way of communicating that is platform independent off of that. Off of the communications plus project management. So you might look at a service like Trello, Monday.com, Asana, Basecamp, Write as well. And so what you're doing with that is you're essentially creating a way to communicate and show where the ball is on a particular project. And so if you have sort of not adopted project management as it relates to communication, where you're just passing a file hard copy, or you're sending communications over email back and forth, I'd invite you to examine one of these project management / communication systems, because there's a lot of power in everyone sort of seeing where everything is. So for instance, if you are somebody that is into lean management or agile management, where you're doing Kanban boards off of it and seeing where swim lanes are for work in there, Trello, which using its card system, is a great way to understand where you are on a project. Where's the backup? And, I think that's a really important point to bring up in a world where if you're doing distributed working, what you're doing is often reallocating resources to the point of greatest need. So you're not running your operations exactly the way that you were before. And so if you have assets in the way of labor and people that want to work for you and have work and you have work that needs to get done, you may need to reallocate those assets based on what a service like Trello tells you is the status of a particular case. And so one of the benefits of thinking about things in an agile or lean management fashion is to say, okay, great. What is the stuff that's holding me up? It's a game of whack-a-mole. Like, where am I backed up right now? And then what can I attend to? And so I think in a distributed manner where you can't have easy communication, you can't physically touch a file or see the clients coming in and out or whatever else you're going in there, doing a service like that, or you're working with a project management service like that, I think is a benefit. Speaking about practice management, this is probably not the time to go, this is not the time to go into each one of all of these things, but there are basically 2 different structures that you can go into. One is 100% cloud-based. And so I've listed all of the providers that I know about that do it. I know that there are others. There are probably others that you love. That's okay. Go with the one that you love. I'm not saying that it's wrong. But one of the things that on the cloud-based is that while some of these have some sort of web apps that are on them, it's difficult to work with the majority of these in a non-connected fashion. So this morning, I was late to the office in my normal time because our Verizon router broke. What does that mean? 7 people in my house, a hair away from complete Lord of the Flies because they can't get online. The difference is that if I showed up at my house with no internet connection, because I use Daylight as my practice management software, all of what I need resides locally on my device. And so, on my laptop, on my phone. And so I can work 100%. It's one of the reasons why I've always advocated a local plus cloud syncing solution, because it gives you the best amount of work to be able to, if you were flying or whatever's going in there. Look, I don't know what's coming up, but one of the things you should insulate against is the fact that you always have to be connected online. Yes, that's going to be the way that you do the majority of your work. Yes, I think it's a utility that will likely stay in place no matter what's going on. But if something were to happen, if you get ground to a halt, if you don't have internet connection, if your Verizon wireless router breaks and you have to send your wife driving for 20 minutes to go buy a new one in order for there not to be pandemonium, you want a solution to work, okay? And so you might want to think about that. FileMaker Pro, which is a database software, is another way of doing that, because this database software will allow you to create all the project management stuff that you have, plus it's got all kinds of power and document drafting and things like that. The way that you would characterize something like FileMaker Pro, which, by the way, is also platform independent and also available online, is that it is a relational database, meaning that you feed pieces of data into these little thing called, the name is escapes me, but like there are like the little bits of information, right? So each one of those you can manipulate off of that. And so the idea is that you can put it as a date field. You can use that date field. You could use calculations off of it. So it's a record, excuse me. So each one of these things is a record, and you can manipulate those records. And that's what a relational database is. Whatever you're doing, because you're going to be in a distributed manner, look at deadline tracking. There are still ethical obligations that you have to honor. Contact management, specifically sharing that. So you want that in multiple places. So you want to be able to have everybody access how to contact a particular client, how to contact a referral source, how to contact a particular vendor for what it is, and it resides in one place. Scheduling, so that again, if you're distributing this model and you can't communicate off of that, it's available, especially if somebody happens to go down. And then also project management, to know where a case status is, a project status is. This would be the same whether it's client information or if it's marketing efforts and things that you've got going on. All right, moving on. CRM and document management. So beyond just contact management, think about how you're going to communicate with the outside world. So Infusionsoft, KeepPro, KeepGrow, GreenRope, Less Annoying CRM. These are all ways of communicating with the outside world. The ones that are listed on the top here tend to be more powerful than MailChimp and Constant Contact, meaning that you can create multiple campaigns, manipulate that information, track leads, do all that kind of stuff. If you're not familiar with that, investigate it, because those different campaigns do end up using more power. I end up using Infusionsoft, but I have used MailChimp and Constant Contact, and they have made their offering more robust so that you can do email campaigns and you can do segmented emails. Again, we're going to be communicating with people in a way that we haven't done before, which is largely to say, hey, if you have a need to communicate with us, we're going to meet you where you are. So whether that's social media advertising or doing email or sending video or whatever it is, these pieces of software will help you with that. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of document management is if you are somebody that just used a Word document and put it on a file server, you may want to think about migrating that to something that is actually accessible no matter where you are. So maybe your file server is addressable from the outside with a static IP, don't know, but services like WorldDocs, NetDocuments, and DocModo, which is actually a Mac-specific one. And the reason why I use that is not just because I'm an Apple person, but it's actually the one, I'm not supposed to say this, but they're not on the call, that Apple corporate and legal uses. So it's extremely secure, extremely robust. What this will give you is version controlling, so that if somebody is creating something within that system, that they can add that version to it, and there it's a sort of a non-destructive thing. So you can keep templates up and working. You have one single repository. When I talk about best practices, one of the things I'm going to warn you against is letting somebody store things locally. We need to be sort of disaster-proofing this and thinking that at any moment, any particular station can go down. And what does that mean for our ability and continuity in our practice, okay? That includes you, by the way, when we talk about having a backup attorney for that. Security protocol, speaking about security. So a few things, work laptop versus own laptop. And so there's been some questions on that. Look, I'm going to make a recommendation. It's always easier to lock down your own work machine, and it's probably better from a malpractice defense standpoint. What did you do? How did you do it? It's probably better if you, in fact, controlled all of the hardware. And if you control all the hardware, you can mandate what happens on there in a very different way. So all of the stuff that I gave you about different recommendations for things that you can and should use for laptops and computers and things like that, you can find a lower cost alternative for one of these things and probably feel like you're investing that in a way that helps you in the future. If you have a policy, if you're going to let them use their home device, you have to have a policy about what they are doing on there, that they can only work on work matters for a particular time, that they can't leave the screen open, that they can't have other people have access to it. All these types of things you're going to want to think about. And I think that we recently received a model policy on working from home that includes some of this stuff. And so one of the things that I would do is reference the Atticus online profiles on Facebook and LinkedIn that are keeping a repository of reference materials off of it, and start to look at that for your own. It's not anything that you can just drop in. You got to think about the way that you practice. What are the fail-safe points or fail points that you're trying to guard against? Looking at all of those and say, okay, great. This is how I'm going to largely protect against it. So you can piece those all together, but definitely put it in place. Communicate on it, remind people on it. One of the things that Sean mentioned in the seminar on Tuesday that I've really taken to heart is you're going to have to approach your team with a certain amount of grace, because in dealing with all of this anxiety, even if you are the model of leadership and calm and confidence, they are still processing it. So they're going to make mistakes that they've never made before. They're not going to hear things that you have said that they typically have heard before. And so we're going to need to approach this with a certain amount of patience and grace, because they're dealing with this in a way probably less prepared than you are, because if you're an Atticus client, you've been working on this stuff on your own and you're better. By the way, speaking about connectivity and Wi-Fi, a couple of things in here. I would encourage you and I would encourage your team to avoid public Wi-Fi. That includes large-scale public Wi-Fi like Google Net that's out there, or using the Optimum services that are essentially login that are outside of your home, right? So you can do like Comcast in your home, but you know that if you go out someplace, you have the Xfinity anywhere you go. Yeah, avoid that stuff, because the thing about it is that hackers are not respecting quarantine rules. In fact, they know that given the larger amount of traffic that's on here, this is a prime opportunity to be sniffing on that stuff. If you haven't already, explore a VPN. A VPN, or a virtual private network, and there's some that are free, and there's some that are paid, will allow you to mask internet traffic so that everything is gobbledygook unless you essentially have the right keys on either end of that. And that's something that you would fire up anytime that you're using a form of a public Wi-Fi if you're forced to do that.
Hey, Victor.
Mike, do you have a question?
Yeah, we wanted someone to know if this applies if you're using your personal computer to remotely access your work computer. What concerns there may be?
Same idea, in the sense that while your home network is probably less susceptible to getting hacked into, okay, especially if you've got passwords and things that are on there, the communication that goes between the two ought to be encrypted on both ends. And so if all you have is a tunneling software that says, hey, emulate that screen, but send everything naked back and forth, that's not great. And so the best sort of services between that, encrypted on both ends. They say, okay, I'm going to let you tunnel into a computer that's back at home, and in the office, excuse me, and show me what's on there, but you want it encrypted in that end when it sends it, and then encrypted when it, and then de-encrypted when it's on your end. So you want it encrypted in the communication. So I would encourage you to be looking at making sure that your service does that, because you can communicate that out in the open, and that's probably a bad thing to do, especially the keystroke. So for instance, if what you're doing is you're emulating your home computer, then what happens, your office computer at home, then when you open up that screen, if your keystrokes are not encrypted, then what they're seeing is the login to the file server, the login to the email. And they're actually getting the keystrokes off of that, even though they're not necessarily, sort of seeing what's going on your screen. So that's why I actually I would recommend that you avoid emulating a box that's in the office. Bring the box to where you're at, and then have the communication be either cloud-based or file servers off of there, but try to avoid having the communication back and forth, okay? Any other questions on this, Mike?
A few comments on some of the things you've covered. One person pointed out, Daylight is cloud-based, and I think you had that on your slide, but Daylight is Mac only. And
I did say that. That's right.
FileMaker Pro, I think this is a question. Is this the same as saving in OneDrive or Dropbox? I use this in combination with my case.
Right. So let me go into the document creation and document management components of it, and speak specifically as to FileMaker Pro. This relational database is a little bit different than Dropbox. So Dropbox and Box.net are essentially same thing with like OneDrive or Google Docs. They are file servers. So they create little folders. They put little documents in there. You can access them. FileMaker Pro is a little bit different. You can put the documents where they are, but you're also including information in the records. And so what you're doing there is being able to manipulate the information. The reason why I put it in communications or practice management that was local plus cloud syncing is you can put dates in, you can schedule, you can put contacts in, you can send emails from it, you can manipulate the data to create documents. So it's a lot more powerful than using sort of Dropbox or Box.net as a file server. I think they're all great, by the way. Box.net, OneDrive, all of that. If you need a distributed file server that is online, there's nothing wrong with any of those, okay? They end up working really well. The one thing that I will give you as a tip for something like Dropbox is they have recently moved their installation to a difference between Smart Sync and local only. And Smart Sync is they'll show you where the file is, but you're not keeping it on your computer. Well, the problem is that if something happens where you can't access the internet, then you actually don't have your files on that computer. So one of the things you might want to do is switch to local. The reason I don't like Dropbox is remember what I said about not letting, like if you did that on your machine that you own, probably not a big deal. If you let somebody do that on a machine that they own, now they have a complete copy of everything that was on your Dropbox folder on their home computer. And I don't like that, okay? I don't think that that's going to help. And I'm going to be talking about something specifically on profile management when we get to the next slide, but that's a couple of thoughts on that. Moving on for document management, again, you want to encourage them to avoid creating and saving documents locally. You want to treat everybody like they might disappear tomorrow. They could come down with something and you don't want it on their, you know how people are. They got an image of their desktop and it's this whole morass of documents that they've saved on the desktop because they figure that was the easiest place to look like. That doesn't happen, all right? And should not be happening, especially in this world. Wherever you can, I think document templates should be in the cloud and be locked down so that we can't version control off of that. So no one person should have the kind of piece of sourdough that helps everything else grow, all right? So it should be distributed, it should be cloud synced, and it should be non-destructive. Anyone that is communicating with clients along the way, look, we're going to want to encourage them from doing it from a home email or a home phone, something that you don't control, okay? Sometimes that's not perfectly capable, but to the extent that you can, it's really simple to set up an email address that has a web login, you know, even if you didn't have one from before. So like, let's say you were using Office or you were using Google Mail or something like that, where you had your own email server. All of these places are going to have browser-based input, so they can do email from there. And they don't have to put it on their home office, and they don't have to put it on their home. You don't have to do it anything that's on the home, okay? Off of that. Next, talking about mobile device management. This is generally a new topic for people that don't know it, but given the amount of number of people that are using devices to run parts of the practice, including your team members, one mistake that I've seen is to allow team members to have local installations of everything that you would give them, the app, Slack, and the Daylight, and the MyCase, or whatever you have, and the email address. They all put it in locally. If you have a great relationship with all your teams, that's great. But if something happens to one of them, they quit, they go rogue, or whatever else, one of the things you can't do is grab that back. You can change the passwords off of it, but that won't remove the information. And so one of the things that we recommend is a form of mobile device management, or MDM. And so Jamf is a provider off of this. You can actually use Apple servers themselves to do it if you want. A little more difficult, but you can. But the idea here is if you're looking for something where you can install a profile onto a device, and that profile then sends out all of the accounts that you want, including email and any of the software that you have, when you need to, you can just remove that profile. It works if you have something lost, stolen, buy a new device, need to set something up, and a service like Jamf Pro is definitely one of the smoother, easier installations. I think it's like $1 a device for the first 3 devices. I mean, it's really inexpensive, $1 a month, whatever it is, but it allows you to be able to manage people's devices, and I think that's a growing for lack of a term, concern, given the more distributed work people do on their devices. Everyone has somebody that has the work email on their device. That's cool. When they quit and you change the password, they still have all of the old emails and all of the old contacts, right? With mobile device management, that doesn't happen. A few other things, because we're coming up on the top of the hour. Tips for first-time workers, all right, in terms of arranging your space, really think about ergonomics. I think that few people have set up their home working space for working for long periods. You're going to want to rethink this in the same way that you think about where you sit and where you do work in the office. You want that to be a similar place so that you are not injuring yourself on that. Find quiet, avoid the kitchen table, and encourage others to avoid the kitchen table. It's the easiest area for people to set something up. If there's so much traffic, you know that you have people that are at home, you know that you have distractions off of there. Really think about your work as a sacred space, and take over more space than you think that you do. So this is not the opportunity to have a very small corner with just your laptop fits. It's not a great working environment. It doesn't inspire things that you need to do. I think largely you want to think about taking more space. I will tell you something funny that my next door neighbor used to do, and this goes to sort of maintaining normalcy throughout this, and that is, he used to get dressed in the morning in his full suit, get in his car, drive around the block, get out of his car, and go to work in his house. And for whatever it was, that for him was a switch. That meant that he could go ahead and now be in work. I don't think he drove back home to get changed. I think he was just done. But it was funny that he did that every morning that he worked. Take breaks. Just because you're sitting at home with maybe fewer distractions off of what you have in there, or because you can just apply to that, you need to keep yourself recharged off of it. Expect time for things to adjust, specifically in your team members. This is not going to be a smooth transition where you just say, well, we're working at home, and by the way, I expect you to have exactly the same amount of productivity as you had before. It's going to take an adjustment time. They're not used to doing this. You're not used to doing it. Go in with a little bit of grace. Set expectations for clients and referral sources. And the thing about this is there's no shame in communicating this. You know, we've been communicating with our clients from the beginning, saying things are changing. This is what's going on. Expect a slower response time. We're in a distributed model. Is that okay? You know, and checking in with them. Everyone's been super understanding because we're all in this together. And so I think that it is okay to sort of talk about the elephant in the room, name it, you know, invite it to sit down, doing all the things that you need to ahead of time, and setting expectations about what it's going to be. And if you don't have a mindfulness practice at this point in time where you're trying to manage any form of anxiety, I absolutely encourage one. And here, because I have to link it back to tech again, Headspace is a great app, Calm is a great app, 10% Happier is a great app. They all have free trials off of it. I think some of them have even removed their paid versions of that, trying to help people manage this. Encourage your team to be doing this in the same way, because they're going to need some help recharging the battery off of this. Best practices, and I think this is where sort of we'll end off of this. Treat every night as the last night in the office, meaning tell people to take their laptops home every time that they leave. Be ready to work on a moment's notice. You know, we just got an email in our town. We were all okay until somebody in the middle school got tested positive. Oh, great. Now that it means that these other people who were coming in regularly, like somebody has a middle school kid, probably should stay at home for a little while until we really figure out the incubation period and what they have. So anything can change. The testing positive, your building gets shut down. You can have a quarantine or a curfew in a particular town. CNEX is doing this in New Jersey. A couple of the New Jersey towns are doing it. So act as though the time that you leave the office is the last time, all right? And you're going to want to be able to really enforce that with your team and in your own habits as well. You don't want a lack of diligence in this area to kind of cause this fail point because people weren't adhering to the policies that you have, okay? Also, run trials with your team. So if you're not currently at a place where you are quarantined or working remotely, you may want to run mock trials as soon as possible, okay? So you may want to do things like saying, okay, we're just going to send the marketing department home, or we're just going to work with the attorneys at home, or we're going to say these two people and they're at home, and see what that's like, and just rotate that around and figure out where the kinks are in the system, work them out. You may not be perfect off of that. And by the way, have somebody pose as a client or a prospective client and experience everything from the outside. So you can have somebody stay at home. What's it like to have a virtual meeting? What's it like? What's in the background? What can you change about that? What do the communications sound like? What does the phone sound like? Because you won't know what that's like unless you survey them and ask them off of it. And to the extent you can get that information sooner rather than later, hey, you know, definitely do that. And finally, Oh, by the way, last thing, observing opportunities for improvement. Um, we're big in our office about slaying sacred cows, meaning that something that you thought was the only way to do things before and you could never do anything right, we're going to challenge all of that in these circumstances. It's coming, okay? So the sooner that you understand that that's a possibility, the bigger that the sooner that you will see the opportunities for improvement. And so what I'm encouraging you is to essentially look at that and say, look, what can I take from this? Why is this happening for me? You know, what's going on here that I can now improve upon? I think we're going to learn a lot about what essential pieces of your business are and are not, essential jobs are and are not. We're going to get a lot of that information super quick. Listen, all right, because your business is going to be talking to you throughout this time. And the last thing is, for those of you that have a team, look, this is challenging them as much as it is challenging you in the way that you're doing it, challenging your clients. And so what you want to do is try to find ways to improve and keep the culture going. You know, look for water cooler opportunities. Send things on the random channel on Slack that are meant to have the same kind of communications that you would have otherwise. Encourage that. Let that happen. Don't get myopic and graspy on what's going on, because it's not a way to engender great work from your team and an idea that things will be going on into the future. As I mentioned before, be more forgiving and gracious with mistakes and learning curves. They weren't working remotely because you never set that up and tested it. It's not their fault that it's not working perfectly. Manage your expectations, manage your anxieties, and be more gracious with what you give them in terms of leeway to learn that stuff. And set the culture you want by example. So you're looking for culture, confidence, calm, a resolve to get things right. You know, this idea that we are going to get through this and we are going to get through it together. 12:03, Mike, kind of landed it.
Great. Well, we have a few more suggestions for you here. There are several ways you can stay informed on how to protect your law firm. We are posting items that our clients are sharing with us on our social media pages. Everything from sample client letters, referral letters, policies, guidelines for emergency operations. We're posting those as they come in. We've also started a daily coronavirus preparedness hotline for you from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern. I realize that, you know, for the West Coast folks, that's a little bit early. If you can't make the call, you can email us at grow@atticusadvantage.com, and a practice advisor will contact you as soon as possible. We are also offering some additional webinars next week. We have on the 25th, one for personal injury and litigation practices. Also on the 26th, we have one for estate planning and elder law. And we have some item-specific response plans on protecting your marketing on the 24th and preserving cash flow in an economic slowdown on the 26th. These are on our website. You can visit our site, and under the What We Do tab, you'll see webinars, and go to that page and you can find the sign-up pages on there. Finally, Victor, I'd like to give you a chance to mention your tech conference before we open it up for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So, you know, I've been hosting a tech conference for the last 10 years or so. It's called MacTrack Legal. You can find it at mactracklegal.com. And it's being hosted this September, the 24th and the 25th at Disney World Yacht and Beach Club. That's where we've had it for basically almost every year that's in there. It's sort of like a tech conference for legal tech. So if you like some of the more practical approaches off of this, if you like what would be the marriage of Atticus principles with tech idea, we're going to go into Text Expander. We're going to go talk about, you know, specific tools about how to use tech to enhance your practice. It is a great conference. I don't say that just because I host it. I actually make very little money from it, but I do it as a labor of love. I do it because it's a conference I want to go to, but it's only viable if people do go. So if you're interested in attending, one of the things we're going to do is offer Atticus members or Atticus attendees $100 off the registration. So you just go to MacTrack Legal, look at what the proposed agenda looks like, the speakers, the topics, things like that. And if you like what you see, just enter Atticus at the checkout page on Eventbrite, and you got $100 off. We'd love to see you for that Thursday and Friday. And like I said, it's one of the best things that I've ever done. It's a place that I go to that I like the attorneys, and I like the tech conversation. For me, it's a better environment than even ABX Tech Show. It's like if Atticus had a tech show, this would be it. And so that's what reason why we hosted. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you just want more information, just put in your email, and when we'll email you as speakers get lined up and everything else.
Okay, great. Before we get into the list of questions, we'll probably go for another 5 minutes. If we don't get to your question, I am going to be emailing Victor all of the questions that came in. and who asked them, and he can respond back to you in kind. Victor, on the conference, one of the more recent questions was, if you're not Mac-based, is MacTrack Legal something that would still be useful?
Yeah, I think that the answer is going to be yes. Most of the stuff that we've done is, first of all, modulate that to being somewhat Apple device-based. So first of all, if you've got an iPhone or an iPad or you want to learn how to use that, you're going to get a lot of information from there. A lot of the tools that we talk about, whether it's text expander, document creation, are more cloud-based than they are Mac only. And so there's a lot of value in that. And then there's programming in there that is tech leaning, but it's really more about practice management and mindset stuff. So it's more Atticus in that. So I would say that if you came for that 2 days, there might be one session you're like, this doesn't apply to me, I'm not on a Mac. Hopefully it would get you to consider whether or not you would use it for that tool, but it might be one session out of 11 that might be completely Mac specific. I think the rest of them would be applicable.
Great. Next question is, can you recommend software or an app for automating new client intake information into something like Daylight?
Yeah, so a couple of things that you can do from that. Let's say if it was Daylight and Mac based, there is a software provider called iOS Expert. And iOS Expert creates a number of plugins that allows you to bring information and kind of link those two things together. If you're on a service like Clio Grow brings that information in. And there are a number of, so anything that's got a cloud system. So I'll give you an example. I use Infusionsoft with Daylight, using a service called Zapier, Z-A-P-I-E-R. And what Zapier does is it connects to cloud-based APIs, all right? And that's basically software language, so that it can link different things together and they can talk to one another. So you can look at the software that you have and look at another software, and if they both are linked into Zapier, they can essentially connect those two things together. So a lot of the cloud-based CRMs like Rocket Matter or Clio, in my case, are all, because they all have cloud APIs that are published, other companies create the way to use Zapier to talk to the two of them. So like I said, I use two non-standard ones. I use Infusionsoft, which is really not Mac at all. In fact, they hate Safari to do anything with, but I can use it to plug into Daylight because I use Zapier as the conduit between the two.
Yeah, I can attest for Zapier. I call it Zapier. I don't know if it's Zapier or not, but I call it Zapier. We use it quite a bit at Atticus too, to tie together different platforms to be able to push information back and forth. So it's a great tool. Someone has a simple question here. Is something like Trello useful even if you do not have employees, which is project management software? I would say yes. I use it for personal projects as well as work projects.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. Look, at any point in time, the idea that you're using your head to store information rather than to process information is a fail point, right? So David Allen, through Getting Things Done, says your head is good for having ideas, not for holding ideas. And so any software, whether it's Trello or you use OmniFocus or Things, or you use some form of productivity software where you use it as the repository of your ideas and the management of those to projects that have an endpoint, that's great. You should be doing that. Let your brain do what it's supposed to do, which is answer questions. It's not a container for information. And the more that you try to use it on it, the more that you create anxiety about the stuff that comes slipping out, and the less productive you actually are. So I agree with you, Mike. Use some tool to limit your brain power to the thing that it's really good at, which is answering questions and then processing the information, not holding where something is as a status.
Great. A couple more questions here. This one should be easy for you. If you have a lot of scanning to do, would you still recommend the ScanSnap versus the Fujitsu 7160 model?
I'm not familiar with the 7160. I'm assuming that it is a desktop one where you drop the papers in and it's sort of like a bigger of a workhorse off of it. I would tell you that I haven't seen, so here's the only limitation to the Fujitsu ScanSnap. It cannot handle more than 50 pages in the hopper before you have to put more things in the hopper. And so the only difference that I've seen is that if you have something that's 200 pages, you're going to reach and drop the next 50 4 times. If that's problematic for you, and I don't mean that in a loaded way, I'm just saying if that's not going to work for you, then look at something that's a desktop, the workhorse thing. The problem is that the workhorse can't ever be the mobile wireless one, right? And so I would suggest that really examine how much your high volume is And if it is something that is manageable with, look, you're going to need exercise if you're sitting home, so we're going to do this a couple of times. So if it's manageable with that, then I would say go with the more mobile desktop scanner on the iX versions, the S1500, the S500. These are all great ones. And they're probably going to be less expensive, but I'm only guessing at that in terms of the difference in the price.
Okay. And finally, I have two DocuSign related questions. I'm going to give them to you both. Maybe
Oh,
we'll be able
good
to
one.
answer them both.
Yeah.
The first one
Sure.
is I'm interested in DocuSign or similar tech to be able to sign wills, powers of attorney, etc. Our court allows Zoom to have video conferences and swear-ins for an executor of an estate, and I would like to learn more. The other DocuSign question is, what do you recommend as a best DocuSign program for Macs? We use Microsoft Word templates and convert them into PDFs for our fee agreements and intake.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First, I think DocuSign is capable of using if you were a Mac Office, in the sense that, you know, you can upload it to DocuSign service, which is what we do, and then you can send it out, they can sign it, and then it comes back. So I don't think you need to do anything different if you're a Mac company. The real question is, as to the first one and to the second one, is can you use electronic signatures for things, you know, for everything that you want to use? And so there are a number of states that have electronic notaries, or they'll have digital signatures as execution. For the person who had the first question, you got to make sure that you can actually do that. New Jersey, we can't. I can't have an electronic signature for something like a power of attorney. It just won't work, no matter how awesome the software is. They have not adopted that. And the other thing that you want to think about in terms of like the way that you conduct business around that, if it's something that's crucial, like I'm an estate planning attorney, an elder law attorney, if it's something crucial like a power of attorney where competency is going to be an issue, look, think about how that's going to get attacked from the outside. And so even though you can have a virtual meeting off of something and send a DocuSign, did you know who was in the room? Were they at gunpoint to say yes to your questions and then sign something? It's fanciful. It sounds ludicrous, but you can't defend that if you don't have a different system. So, you know, think about doing things that are in fact, non-traditional. You might have a drive-by signing. Say, okay, great, you're going to come into the office, you stay in the car, we'll pass things, you know, in a plastic bag, you sign them, put them back, we'll take them back. Something like that. But in terms of using DocuSign as a service, it's a very powerful way, even at the base level, to get something signed and done that right now is probably one of the better things. I think it's just EchoSign, a couple others that are on there, but the best things that you can do off of it. I think it works best for retainer agreements. I think it works for different kinds of contracts like that. And I would only caution that if you're going to use it for the actual execution of something like estate planning documents, make sure that your state does allow electronic notaries or do notaries in that fashion to use electronic signatures. And just think about what the competency standards are going to be and how that might get attacked from the outside.
Okay, Victor, I'm going to leave it up to you if you'd like to, if you have time for a couple more questions or not.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a few more minutes. We can go to 12:20 on my end.
All right, great. So one comment that came in is I have three scan snaps, and one is the iX300 mobile scanner for home. I don't recommend it. I wish I would have spent more money. That's just a comment on the iX300.
I agree. You know, off of that, the iX300s, the S1100s, the ones that are pure mobile, work okay if you're in court and you've got a single order and you're going to shove the paper through there, and so you can distribute it out so that you don't have to take it back to scan it. As a office machine, really only the S500, the S1500, the iX500, and the iX1500, those are the ones that we recommend for office machines.
Okay. The next one is, what do you think of 8x8? I've used it for a number of years. I'm not familiar with 8x8.
Yeah, so 8x8 is a competitor to each of Ring Central and Vonage Business. I may have misspoken, called it 888 when I was talking about a different service in there, but that's essentially what it is. It's a VoIP. You can do fax off of it. You can do other stuff. As I mentioned before, if it's working for you, that's great. When I examined it, it looked a little too small for what I wanted to rely on, so I went with Vonage Business instead, as having, you know, different customer service, something I could rely on, the reviews. I'm not saying that you're wrong in doing it. I just, you know, if you're looking at any of these things, you're going to look at their internal structure and the ability to withstand a large demand coming quickly off of it. So if you're not already signed off of it, examine that. Do your own due diligence. Ask about their uptime. Ask about, you know, ask other users. You know, are you getting stuff? Is there downside? Is this stuff coming as gibberish? You know, is it packets? Is the phone's too much? They have an agreement that comes on the back end and you get screwed and you have to pay $400 if you try to leave. Ask the questions, okay? Because they're all trying to do business. Most of them are trying to do business in a legitimate way. They're all going to have different wrinkles off of what they've got.
Okay, great. Here's another question about Zoom. I am a litigation attorney requiring multiple meetings with clients, either at the office or with court personnel. Is Zoom the best way to handle virtual meetings? And what if the other party doesn't have Zoom? I can tell you Zoom does have a free version of their account, and you can have up to 3 people in the Zoom meeting at no cost. If you need more than 3 people, you'll need to buy a pro version. Otherwise, the meeting will be cut off at 40 or 45 minutes.
And that's on the host side, if I'm correct, Mike, meaning that if somebody was
Yes.
receiving a Zoom invitation, if you're paying for it, they don't need to do anything in terms of paying for it. And so one of the nice things about Zoom, is the same way for, let's say, GoToMeeting, is that they can be on a device. So it becomes easy for them to click the link on their phone, open the app there, and be able to see you in the same way that they would if they were using the laptop with a webcam. So it's a way, if this phone right here is the thing that has the camera. It's our webcam. And so I like Zoom for having multiple people in the meeting. I also like Google Hangout for the same concept. If you have multiple people that need to see each other, go with one of the services that's meant to do that. If you're projecting information out, like it's a webinar or it's an education or it's a presentation, Zoom's probably not my favorite off of that. Something like GoToMeeting or a WebEx software might be better choice. Great. Do we have anything else, Mike?
Yes, we do. Sorry, I had myself muted. Can you speak to backup systems in terms of restoring, as in a case of a hard drive failure or preventing ransomware?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that I would recommend. First of all, there's generally accepted 3-2-1 as a way of backing things up. So you always want 3 copies on 2 different kinds of media, and one of them has to be off-site, right? So what does that mean? So 3 copies of everything that you need, 2 different media, electronically available on a thumb drive, right? So that no matter what ends up happening, you have a way of accessing it. And one of them needs to be removed from where the other one is. So if you're still using a file server and a hard drive in the office, our backup, we want 3 copies of the backup, 2 different kinds of media. So it's not just going to be like an SSD drive. We'll have an SSD drive and we'll have something else. Put it onto a thumb drive or something similar, and then take one and have it off-site. So that's the first thing, 3-2-1. The other thing is you're going to want to test the system. So when you have a backup, actually test the restore. So a lot of people fail at understanding, well, I've got a copy of it. Great. How do you make that live? Okay. How do you restore that? And so you need to test the restoration process to know that in fact is a backup that's usable. Okay. Look, you can buy 2 terabyte SSD drives for $60. They just plug in, they're super fast. You can use them to back everything up. But this is a reason why you want a centralized place for your information, because so what you don't want is to have your team members have to back up their laptop because there's something local on there. No, we're not doing that. Everything they're working on is already synced to some place that you can pull a backup off of. All right, that's the right way to do it, and that's why they can't do anything locally, and that's why they can't store anything locally.
Great, great. And this one may be a loaded question for you, Victor, but a couple people have asked why you prefer Apple products versus Microsoft or PCs.
Oh, I said in the beginning that I stopped teaching that particular pig to sing. So here's the quick off of it. When I started my practice, I don't like paying for IT fees. I want hardware that doesn't break and uses high quality off of it. And I wanted something that was as user-friendly as possible. So in the beginning, 10 years ago, that really quickly led to a conversation around using Apple because the quality of the materials that in their boxes that we're building were high end. I have boxes here that are 8, 9 years old, still work, they're fine. I have a 2011 iMac, perfect, everyone uses it. The idea that you have something on a platform that is Unix-based is going to get a little gearheady. So at the time, and I can't actually speak to Windows security now, but at the time, you have to give root permission level at a Unix level in order to install something, which meant that if anything came out from the outside that was nefarious, you'd actually literally have to put in your password that said, yes, please install this stupid thing on here. So that made it sort of idiot-proof. and also more secure. And the idea that we use the device for what it was and didn't have to tinker is there. I got friends that love tinkering with their Android settings. Awesome. I want no part of it. I just want their phone to turn on, and I want to use it for my practice, and I want to go away. So for me, there's that. I'll give one more thing to it, as you can hear from the passion in my voice as I talk about it, which is this. The culture of the people that use Apple devices is a culture that I want to be around. And so I don't know what that says about the PC people, but I found that in running the MacTech conference, MacTech Legal conference, and the other stuff that we do, the people that gravitate towards that are the kind of people that I want to surround myself with, because we had to kind of roll our own solutions for a very long period of time. We're generally more entrepreneurial, and so the culture around that. And by the way, we just enjoy the what goes into what creates the Apple ecosystem. So, I spent a lot of time, take the iPad as a halo device around that. A lot of people are on PCs, but they love their iPad and iPad Pro and working off of it much more than they would like an Android tablet off of it. Why? Because so much of the ecosystem around there is thought about their ability to just interact and use with it, as opposed to having to manipulate and fuss with it. And so all of our notes, the way that we interact with digital paper, how we communicate, the software solutions, they've all just gravitated, been more like what I wanted in Apple. But you don't have to agree.
All right, great. Next question is, are there services you're aware of that will do scanning for my firm?
There are. And a lot of them are very, similar to the archival stuff. You can send something to Iron Mountain, if Iron Mountain's in your backyard, and they'll scan everything in there and send you a PDF file off of it, or send you a series of hard drives of everything that's in there. So they're definitely there. The thing about it is that they tend to be expensive, generally expensive. So you'd have to investigate that. But there are services that just do the scanning. You give them a banker's box, they give you back a hard drive.
Someone would like to know your ritual for getting to work when you're working from home.
Do I get dressed and do I walk around? So that's really funny. That's a good question. I do get dressed outside of what I slept in. So I make myself ready for the day, and kind of in the same way. And for me, I tend to be, it's just specific to me, Mike. I don't know if anybody needs to know this, but I tend to be a noisy worker. And what that means is that I need music and a candle. I need inputs off of it, because if I let my brain just go silent off of that, I don't get very well focused. My brain goes someplace else. So I'm a big fan of both music and candles in a work environment. So I encourage that.
I would also recommend,
I hope that answered the person's question.
Work from home for nearly 10 years before I opened up my office, is don't eat lunch at your desk. Get up, away from your desk. And even if there are chores that could be done, laundry, dishes, and your spouse is like giving you the evil eye to do them, you're working. And that needs to remain in your mind.
Right.
Next question is...
it should be the last question for me, okay?
This will be the last question for you. Is there an issue with availability of legal software for Apple?
No, not at all. Especially when you start to think about the following. First, most of the cloud-based services are platform agnostic. So Rocket Matter, Clio, that's all browser-based. Second, Microsoft has made incredible strides in making everything available everywhere. The Office 365, we use it here. We use it. I mean, this is being shown on PowerPoint here. Why? Because I can get one subscription at $8.95 a month, get 5 installations on desktop and 10 installations on mobile. And here I am, an Apple user, using Microsoft core products for what it is that we do. And I think a lot of them have a lot of value in that. And the same way that we talked about Daylight or other forms of, Mac-specific, there are Mac-specific solutions if you don't want a cloud-based in every device that you're in here. I've been running a practice for 13 or 14 years that is Apple only, and I would, playfully suggest it's not held me back. So I would not, that thinking that, well, to join into Mac is to limit your world of what you can do. You might limit the way that you interact in it. But what I would say is that, rather than having a Swiss Army knife that does everything, you're going to have a really great paring knife when you need it, and a hatchet when you need that. And so I much prefer having the best tool for the job than having a tool that can do anything at any time.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Victor, for giving your expertise, information, and your time. I also want to thank all of the attorneys who came to today's webinar, because this shows your dedication to your clients, your staff, your business. You've made time to protect it. If you have any questions about anything that Victor asked and you didn't get a chance to type it in or chat, you can email us at grow@atticusadvantage.com. You can email us if you have questions about other practice management related issues that relate to whether it's the coronavirus or just general business questions. We are here to help you. So thank you again, Victor, and thank you everybody for joining.